by Senator Evan Bayh when he was governor. But also, we need to grow our economy here in Indiana so that we have a stronger economic base to fund public education, including our public universities, and that's why I'm running for governor.
Mr. Horning, 45-second rebuttal.
45 seconds to rebut all of that. I guess I have to say that, given the fact that we have gone down this road of trusting politicians with more and more, and given the fact that you can see very plainly that schools are almost like farm teams for the pros now, where we spend a lot of money on sports, and not a lot of that makes it into the classroom. And since 1959, when we started deconstructing the common school system and started making bigger and bigger schools, fewer schools that are farther away from kids' homes and from farther away from parents, where we have to use buses and big cafeterias. Our education system isn't about education anymore. It's babysitting and it's sports. And we have to get serious about whether we're going to keep it going in this direction or whether we're going to focus on education, which means maybe paying for books.
Well, it would be helpful if this Congress would stop misstating everything that I have proposed. Now, I very clearly said that I'm simply suggesting we use the future growth in lottery revenue, not all of it. And it doesn't matter to me whether we do this through a private auction. If that raises more money, we can help more students, then that's what I'm for. Otherwise, we can bond against it. Really, I would also suggest politely, you ought to stop treating private as a dirty word. It is the private sector in which most Hoosiers work and where the bills of this state get paid. And, businesses are listening. When we express a hostility to the private sector, we run the risk of undoing an awful lot of goodwill we have done that is bringing thousands of jobs to Indiana right now.
Ms. Long-Thompson.
Well, I grew up in a family business, and my husband and I are business people, and we feel very strongly that were it not for entrepreneurship, we would have a long way to go in growing our economy here in Indiana. That spirit of entrepreneurship is what moves our economy forward. But the reality is Governor Daniels has been privatizing and selling off assets, and he wants to do the same thing with the lottery, and to make that more palatable, he has said we would use some of that money for education. But the real problem with his administration is the economy. And we are losing too many jobs. In fact, we are losing jobs faster here in Indiana than in any other state. I am running for governor to grow this economy so that we will have the resources we need for our infrastructure and for education.
Thank you. Due to time constraints, we will now limit initial responses to 1 minute and rebuttal responses to 30 seconds. And we're going to begin this time with Mr. Daniels. Ruth Large from Greensburg works in finance. She's concerned about education. She wants to know if there has been any discussion about doing away with book rental fees. Ms. Large points to a 2005 report by the state's Education Commission, which noted that 41 states and the District of Columbia provide free textbooks for their students. Ms. Large asks, why is Indiana still charging for textbooks, especially since the state has a surplus?
I'm with Ruth. And it's one of the things I think we will fix when we raise from 61 cents of the education dollar to something higher the percentage of education spending that reaches the classroom. Less expensive or free textbooks ought to be one of the first things that happens, along with more teachers and better paid teachers. Every 1% improvement in that number is over $100 million. It's a huge opportunity. If we could bring some efficiency to our construction, which has begun to happen, to procurement, and to the overhead, with which I'm sorry to say Indiana education is replete. So I think she's on to something here. I absolutely agree that particularly for the low and middle income families, it's just not conscionable to charge as we do today. Let me just say, with regard to so many of the things that Mrs. Thompson is saying, we don't have to wonder where these policies of hers would lead us. They're there in all our neighboring states. And they were here in Indiana. That's how we arrived 3 years ago at a bankrupt state with a dysfunctional government and an economy that no one at that time was marking off as attractive.
Ms. Long-Thompson, 60 seconds.
Making education affordable, including the affordability of textbooks, that will always be a priority for me. I am an educator and know that education has made all the difference in the world in my life. But there are problems with Governor Daniels' education policies, reflected by the fact that we have a high school dropout rate of about 32%. And we also have too many of our young people not going on to college. And we have too many young people who haven't learned to read. And my education policy will make sure that every child has the opportunity to learn to read. We will give students flexibility to help them to graduate from high school, and we will work to make education, higher education, affordable. The fact of the matter is, with lowered SAT scores, with so many of our kids not finishing high school, we have a whole host of issues that have to be addressed with education policy. But to make it work, we have to grow the economy, and that's not happening under Daniel's leadership.
Mr. Horning?
Well, I think that both the candidates in one way or another kind of touched on the problem when they were saying like lowering test scores, and we have lots of problems that we didn't used to have. And I think that that's kind of a telling statement when you think about how our founders were so right on so many issues and we can't seem to get it through our heads that we're heading in the wrong direction. The Constitution is a good contract. It would work. I say we do it. And I guess I've already said about textbooks, which was the original question, but just as a general note, I have to say I've said some pretty angry things about education. I'm pretty passionate about it, but you guys haven't attacked me on it yet, and I'm kind of thinking that you can gang up on me and maybe diffuse some of the tension between you two.
Mr. Daniels, 30-second rebuttal.
Well, Andrew, I'm not in the business of attacking anybody. And, our campaigns in Indiana, the last recent ones anyway, we've largely been spared from that sort of negative campaigning. And I'm really hoping that it will happen the balance of this year, too. I think education, at least is one topic I think all three of us have agreed about. We're not nearly where we need to be. It didn't start 3 years ago. These problems have been there for decades. And I said in answer to the very first question, it's the biggest issue we have to work on in the next 4.
Thank you. Ms. Long-Thompson?
Well, this is a very important race for Indiana. Our economy has eroded in the last 4 years. We have a high school dropout rate that is unacceptable. And I think it's very important to talk about the real record of the current governor. And that's not negative campaigning unless his policies are not working and unless they're negative. And I think the facts speak for themselves. We are losing jobs faster than any other state in the union. Hoosiers make about 88 cents on the dollar relative to the rest of the country. We can do better.
And Mr. Horning?
I'm not much of a rebuttal on any of that. I think that it's just important to take a look at what we're doing to our kids. This is about children after all. It's not about the teachers. It's not about our babysitting. And I think that we've really kind of lost touch on that sometimes, and we've also lost touch with the fact that there are laws that control what politicians do, and they're built into the Constitution. And I wish all of you would read it and then hold us accountable to it.
Each candidate will now be invited to make a closing statement. Each statement will be 2 minutes in length, and we will begin with Mr. Daniels.
I want to thank again the Commission and all those who participated tonight. I want to especially thank you for holding this first debate in Northwest Indiana. Too often forgotten, too often not considered fully a part of the Indiana family. I've mentioned more than once how essential I think it is that change, and many things we have done to put dollars and certainly our personal attention to that task. I want to thank my two opponents. They are both sincere and passionate advocates of points of view different than mine, both of which frankly look backwards. Mrs. Thompson's to the exact policies that put Indiana in the fix we found it in 3.5 years ago. Andrew's, I think, even further back than that. I respect their points of view, but I think it's very important to contest them vigorously. 3.5 years ago, Indiana was flat broke fiscally. Today, we have the AAA credit rating for the first time in state history. Along the way, we balanced the budget without raising taxes, paid back the schools and local governments, and rebuilt the rainy day funds. 3 years ago, Indiana state government was dysfunctional. Today, agencies like the Bureau of Motor Vehicles and Child Protection are winning national awards. A long way to go in this area, but Governing Magazine found Indiana the most improved state government in America. And CNBC just found us the most improved economy in America. They followed CEO Magazine and Forbes Magazine and ratings of every description. We can all agree we have a long way to go economically, but it's simply false to say that nothing is different.